Hello TPC, thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you being with us in our life groups. I hope that you have enjoyed our series that we have done on resurrections. And this will be our last lesson on that particular series. Before we begin though, I'd like to start with an icebreaker question. And here's the question. Has there ever been a time in your life when you received an unexpected blessing? Well, for me, it happened just probably 2 or 3 months ago. Went to the mailbox and there were two unexpected checks in the mail. And I didn't expect it, but there it was. And I was just like, thank you, Lord, because it came at just the right time. So start off tonight with this icebreaker question. Has there ever been a blessing that came to you that you didn't ask for or that was totally unexpected? We're going to talk tonight about the Shunammite woman and her son and the prophet Elisha and his servant Gehazi. And this particular passage is found in 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning with verse 8 through, I believe it is, 38. And so in this particular passage, it talks about a woman. And she's mentioned in the Bible. There's, of course, numerous mentioned in the Bible. But this lady is mentioned as a great lady. And we really don't know why, but there's little tidbits here and there that maybe allude to her greatness. She was a giver. She gave a lot to the prophet Elisha. She would prepare meals. She was probably given to hospitality because he would come by her house quite often and visit and eat a meal. So much so that eventually, I guess, her and her husband came to the conclusion that we need to build a little prophet's chamber for the prophet and his servant, because they come by, they eat a meal, and they would stay. And so she did that. That's what they did. They built this little prophet's chambers. And then one day, Elisha comes and he just says, you know, what can I do for your kindness? And she looks at him, she's probably a little startled, and she basically says, you know, I'm not expecting anything. I did this because it's in my heart to be a blessing to you. And so I don't need anything. I'm not expecting anything. He said, well, can I speak to the king for you? And she says, no. And he said, well, how about if I speak to the captain of the host? And again, she said, no, I'm not doing anything for reward. She had done it strictly because she felt compelled in her heart to take care of him. This was something that she said, you know what, I have everything that I need. But that wasn't the end of it. Elisha came back and he said, listen, about this time next year, you're going to have a son. And this lady, she was like, are you joking me? Please don't do that to me. I'm begging you, prophet, if you're not telling me the truth, please don't do this to me. And the prophet looked at her and basically was like, no, I'm not joking. Because of your kindness, God is going to bless you with a son. And he did. 9 months later, she was holding that little bundle of joy in her arms. You got to understand now, this was a blessing that came to her that she had not asked for. This was a blessing that came to her that she wasn't expecting. This was joy. This was wonder. This was hope. This was the fulfillment of a dream, all wrapped up in this little boy. And no doubt, you know, she probably spoiled this child. And now, as you continue to read the story, this little boy, he's probably 6 or 7, maybe 12 years of age from the research that I've done, he passes away. He had gone out into the field to be with his father and the reapers. They were reaping the harvest. He had gotten a headache, and his father sent him back in from the fields to his mother's house, and he passed away. He died. So now here is the death of her dreams. Here is the death of her hopes, the death of her joy, so to speak. So what had she done to deserve this? She didn't ask for it in the first place. Remember, she didn't ask for this blessing. Now she received this blessing, and now it's taken from her. So if this blessing had been given to her out of faithful service to a man of God, then what had she done now to deserve for it to be taken away? In other words, was it her fault? And she didn't have the answers, but she knew someone who would. So she masked her grief and she brought her dead blessing into the room of the man of God, and she shut him in. Do we ask similar questions when bad things happen to us? Probably our first instinct is to blame ourselves, and we look introspectively and we say, what did we do wrong? And then after we do that, we're like, how did we displease God? Did we offend God? Did we make Him mad? Did we make Him angry? And these feelings are just really normal. It comes natural when we have been brought up to believe that good deeds get rewarded and bad deeds get punished. But life is not always that simple. Sometimes with God, there's a lot more going on than what we can see or even comprehend. So this brings us to our next discussion question. What happens to us when bad things happen? Do we wonder if it's punishment for not being good enough or living up to God's standards? Like the woman, do we take our dead blessing and shut it away in a room, closing the door of our pain and the problem it represents? That's a great question. Why don't you take a minute and discuss it among yourselves? Now we come to a point in the story where we're going to be introduced to the servant of the prophet. The prophet's name is Elisha. The servant's name is Gehazi. And Gehazi had faithfully served Elisha for many, many years, and he had seen God perform many wonderful and miraculous things through his master, Elisha. And so he'd come to believe that anything was possible. This is why when Elisha wanted to bless the Shunammite woman, he was quick to speak up and to point out that she was without child. He had seen and known that her barrenness was no match for the power of God that Elisha represented. And this child really was sort of his ideal. So in a way, Gehazi felt a sense of responsibility and pride when he saw the joy that this child brought to its mother. This is also why Gehazi felt a profound sense of dread when he saw the Shunammite woman rushing towards them. Some 20 miles distance from her home, she's rushing to get to the prophet. And this is why he sought to stop her when she flung herself at the feet of his master, grabbing his legs desperately. There was something in her. There was anguish in her eyes. There was a frantic in her being that made him uneasy. In her words, when she finally cried out, it penetrated his heart like a knife. And she said, "Did I ask for a son? Didn't I not say, please, prophet, don't lie to me about this?" The boy was dead. And Gehazi knew it in his heart, for he could read it in the woman's grief. And he's thinking, my God, what a tragedy. The very thing that the Lord had provided to bless her is now causing her immense pain. So Elisha extends his staff to Gehazi and commands him to run on ahead and run as fast as he can and lay the staff over his face. The servant asked no questions. He knew well enough not to second guess the prophet of God. And so hope was kindled in his spirit. He could sense that something great was about to happen, and he wanted to be in the middle of it. And yet when he arrived at the house he so frequently visited with his master, he could feel that death was still all over the place. Holding the staff over the face of the boy did not bring him back to life. The dead stayed dead, and he had failed. There's a lot to get into right here, but I'll do my best just to be brief. With the woman, we see someone who is strong. She feels that if she can somehow get to the man of God, then everything will be okay. And in And in and of itself, there's really nothing wrong with that. We should have confidence in our leaders. But the thing that really stands out to me about this story is that never one time does she mention God. Oh, she mentions the man of God numerous times throughout this particular story. But never one time does she mention God of the man. It seems as if it never crossed her mind to pray or to seek God. She's so intent on the man that she neglects the God. The exchange between Elisha and Gehazi and the staff is strange. But it makes more sense if we kind of remember back to the time when Elisha was the servant of Elijah. And Elisha had instructed to take the mantle of Elijah after he had gone and used it to perform miracles like Elisha did. It was a symbol of God's power passing from Elijah to Elisha in a sense. I wonder if this is kind of what Elisha was thinking when he told his servant to take his staff and to lay it over the boy. Well, this is what we do know. The woman trusted. She trusted in the man of God, and the man of God trusted in his staff, and the boy stayed dead. The blessing was still gone. So let's be honest. Do we sometimes search for our answers in people and in things instead of seeking out the God of the people and the things? Do we start to associate God with people or with things to the point where we forget about God? Now, I know that's a very strong statement, but we have to remember God is not constrained by our notions of Him, nor is He shackled to perform miracles in one particular way. Sometimes He wants us to strike the rock. Other times He wants us to speak to the rock. The miracle is not in striking the rock. It's not in speaking to the rock. It's not in the staff. It's not even in the rock. We must remember that it's all in Him. It is all in Him. And yet we go after the staff, or we go after the person who speaks the eloquent prayers instead of just breaking down at the feet of God. This brings us to our next discussion question. Has there been a time where there was a crisis in your life and you ran everywhere except where you should have? Has there been a time that God reminded you that in the end it all starts and it all begins with Him? That the resurrection you and I need can only be found in Him? I want you, if you will, to take a minute and discuss this very important question. So now we come to the story that centers around Elisha, the man of God. He walks in the room and he shuts the door behind him. This is important in the Bible because shut doors are almost always associated with death, finality, and endings. What was once alive is placed in a room, and now this room becomes this tomb. It becomes a burial chamber, and it becomes where the door is sealed up behind, and it's all over. People have failed. Traditions have proven powerless. Methods and things have come up short. Elisha walks into the room and shuts the door behind him, locking himself in with the problem. There's no voices of encouragement. There's no outside influences. It's just Elisha in this room with this dead child. You know, and sometimes it takes death to remind us of where we are to run. The death of a promise, the death of hope, the death of our blessing. Whatever it may be, the Lord wants us to know that it begins and it ends with Him. He is the Alpha and He is the Omega. And if I can borrow a phrase from what I said Sunday morning. God is not into resuscitation. God is into resurrections. Elisha had met another woman not long ago nor far away, a woman who had a problem. Her husband had died and she was now penniless and in fear that the creditors were coming to take her son away. Elisha instructs her to take the little bit of oil that she has and go into her house and begin to pour the oil out until she had filled every vessel that she could get her hands on. But first, before you start to pour, you got to shut the door behind you. Shut the door. You know, we want to put all our troubles in a box and we want to close the lid, to lock up, you know, the monsters in a closet and throw away the key. But that's not the answer. You're on the wrong side of the door when you do this. God wants all of us to come face to face with our problems, the death that threatens our hopes and our dreams and our blessings. Get into a room with them and don't come out until you have won. You know, it reminds me of a friend. He told me about a conversation about raising their kids. He told me that when he walks into the room where his kids are at or walks into their room and he shuts the door behind him, he knows and they know that he means business. They know that something is about to happen and they're probably not going to like it. Well, our enemy should feel the exact same way. Yes, we may fail at times. We may run looking for help out of things or people when we should be simply running to God. We may mess up, but when we finally just decide we're going to buckle down and we're going to face this problem head on, we're going to go to battle with the thing killing our blessing, the door shutting behind us should let the enemy know that we're about to get serious. We are shutting this door just like Elisha shut the door behind him. That's what we should do from the very beginning. Just like he did. He shut the door and he prayed unto the Lord. The woman had sought Elisha. Gehazi had put his trust in a staff. And finally, the man of God lives up to his title and he seeks the God of resurrection. And life flowed back into the body of that boy as sure as oil flowed into the vessels of the widow. Things happen when you get them behind closed doors with God. Something, ladies and gentlemen, has to move and something will give. I know it sounds simple, but that is because it is. This story is not about some magic formula on how to resurrect things dying in your life. It's about knowing where to go and who to trust. Stop running to people. Stop running to things. Go to God and introduce Him to your problem. Remember, close the door behind you. And so this brings us to our final question tonight. Have you ever had a closed door experience with God? One where you had a serious prayer meeting and in seeking God, the answer came. There are just times that all of us in our life are going to face situations. Things are not going to help us. People are not going to help us. We just got to get into a closet and shut the door and just pray until God moves and something happens. I want you to take a minute and discuss this last question. Thank you for being here tonight. May the Lord bless you.